Conversations with historian Jack Buchanan about largely unknown American patriot leaders in the Southern campaigns of the Revolutionary War. Hello, and welcome to The Real American Revolution, a multimedia program to discuss with noted authors and historians what really happened before, during, and after America's War for Independence. Now, my name is Randy Flood, and today my guest is historian Jack Buchanan. Jack is one of our nation's foremost historians about the American Revolution and is affectionately known as the Dean of the Southern Campaigns. His books in the Revolution include the prize-winning The Road to Valley Forge, How Washington Built the Army That Won the Revolution, and the widely acclaimed The Road to Guilford Courthouse, The American Revolution in the Carolinas. Also, The Road to Charleston, Nathaniel Greene and the American Revolution. And Jack's most recent book is The Battle of Musgrove's Mill, 1780. Today, Jack and I will be discussing actually one of three Patriot commanders who fought in the American Revolution and are largely unknown by most Americans. The three are John Sevier, Issac Shelby, and William Richardson Davie. Today, Jack and I will be specifically talking about Issac Shelby. So, Jack, let me provide a little bit of background about Shelby before we launch into the discussion about him.
Right.
Shelby was born the 11th of December, 1750, and he died on the 18th of July, 1826. He participated in Dunmore's War in 1774. He was involved, of course, in the American Revolution and Revolutionary War, and also the War of 1812. He was born in Frederick County, Maryland, and his family moved to Bristol, Tennessee in about 1770, where they built a fort and opened a trading post. Following the Battle of Point Pleasant on the 10th of October, 1774, his family moved to Virginia, where he served as a captain of Minutemen at the outbreak of the Revolutionary War. In 1777, Virginia Governor Patrick Henry asked Shelby to help provide provisions for the Continental Army from 1778 to 1779. Representing Washington County in the Virginia House of Delegates in 1779, he assisted the new governor, Thomas Jefferson, in establishing the boundary between Virginia and North Carolina. Shelby was surveying land in Kentucky in 1780 when new North Carolina Governor Charles McDowell asked him to defend the borders of North Carolina from British attacks. Shelby was one of several commanders of the Overmountain Men and the backcountry Carolina militia that defeated Patrick Ferguson's force of American loyalists at the Battle of Kings Mountain. So, Jack, Issac Shelby had quite a distinguished career as a military leader and a politician. What kind of a leader was Issac Shelby?
Well, again, as with John Sevier and William Richardson Davie, the man had command presence. The kind of person who had this presence, men automatically looked up to him, and he proved this in three wars. He was in three wars. He was in Dunmore's War before the Revolution. As a lieutenant, and served under his father, who was also a well-known frontiersman, Evan Shelby. So he was a highly intelligent man and gifted in leading men on perilous missions.
Mm-hmm. Well, what role did he play at Kings Mountain? We talked about John Sevier. What role did Shelby play at Kings Mountain?
He led his own men. He raised his command in East. He lived in what we now call East Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and he raised his men as Sevier had raised his, and they crossed the mountain and went to Kings Mountain, and he was one of the leaders who led his men up that mountain, along with Carolina backcountry militia and Sevier's over mountain men. Sevier and Shelby both lived in East Tennessee, and at the end there was after Ferguson was killed, and it was obvious who had won the battle, and Ferguson's second in command tried to surrender, but slaughter commenced. And a man remarked of Shelby the courage of the man, just amazing. He ran into the midst of this with people firing from behind him uh, to stop the firing and stop the slaughter and accept surrender. So his courage was undeniable.
Man, that's amazing. Wow. Well, prior to Kings Mountain, there was a really important battle in the South that people just don't know anything about at Musgrove's Mill, which occurred on the 18th of August in 1780. Now, you've written about this in your book, The Battle of Musgrove's Mill, 1780. What role did Shelby play, and with whom did he collaborate in that battle?
He was one of three commanders at that battle, uh, along with uh, Colonel James Williams and Colonel Elijah Clark of Georgia. James Williams from South Carolina. So you have three states involved here: North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, leading men from those three states. And a friend of mine, a retired brigadier general down in South Carolina, says it's the only battle he knows of won by a committee. Uh, and it was a joint command, and they got along seamlessly. There were apparently no arguments at all between the three.
They were certainly very successful at that battle. That was one of the first major engagements where I think the Over Mountain men and the South Carolina or the Carolina militias actually worked together, was it not?
Just about the first, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, after the war, Shelby returned to Kentucky and settled in Boonesboro in about 1783. By 1784, he was working to secure Kentucky's separation from Virginia to become its own state. Now, apparently, there's some speculation that Shelby was possibly involved in some kind of a movement to have Kentucky join with the Spanish colonies. Is there any truth to that, or what are your thoughts?
It's possibly, but there's no hard evidence.
Okay.
He became governor, and uh, great betrayer of the revolution, James Wilkinson,
Mhm.
was an American, but agent number 13 of the King of Spain, was working to break off, and again, you have these separatist movements um, uh, uh, beyond the mountains, and Kentuckians and other Westerners, they were looking at the Mississippi River to transport their goods down the New Orleans and to world markets. Um, Article 8 of the Peace of Paris, the British granted the Americans right of passage on the Mississippi. Spain refused to recognize Article 8 and denied them. Wilkinson's plot was to break off the western parts of the United States and join Spain as a colony so they would have access to the Mississippi. There, it's possible that that uh, that Shelby was involved to some extent, but he came out of it pretty clean. Of course, the plan never went into effect. So he probably was involved a bit. He was also somewhat involved in what was called the French conspiracy. Uh, the French wanted to reestablish themselves in the Mississippi Valley. President George Washington finally called a halt to all this, and uh, Shelby, everybody obeyed what Washington said.
Mhm. That was when Citizen Genet, I
Yes,
believe, was over here trying
that,
to rile up Americans in favor of the French cause, I think.
that's right. That's right. Yes, yes.
Certainly. Well, I can see why people across the Appalachians, if they didn't feel that the eastern states were being very attentive to their needs, uh, on the frontier, I
Yeah.
can see where they might
And
want to
they
seek
did,
alliances.
yes, and they did feel that
Yeah.
they were being ignored.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you talk about trade. I mean, how do you get supplies and equipment and things of that nature to the western areas? It has
Yeah.
to come by way of the Mississippi in many respects, and the rivers, the tributaries that go into the Mississippi. And I can see where that's really important to have transportation needs addressed. So, well, Kentucky became a state in 1792, and Shelby was, in fact, elected as its first governor. Much of the time, apparently, was spent defending the frontier from Indian raids.
Right.
Uh, Shelby ran again, as we know, for governor in 1812, 16 years after his first term. Now, during the War of 1812, Shelby focused on preparing Kentucky for really war against the British. And he was appointed a major general, and he led Kentucky volunteers under the command of William Henry Harrison of the overall army at the Battle of the Thames on October 5th, 1813, in which the famous Indian leader Tecumseh was killed. Now, what was Shelby's relationship with William Henry Harrison, who later became, of course, President of the United States?
Good. Very good. In fact, Harrison called upon Shelby to raise the volunteers and join him in his campaign against the British. And he did. He raised the volunteers. He met them at the Ohio River. They crossed the river and marched up to roughly where Toledo is now and joined Harrison. And at the Battle of the Thames in Canada, he led the infantry and he drove it hard. He was 62 then, and
Mhm.
his third war, and he drove the infantry hard, and um, kept up with the cavalry at the Battle of the Thames. It was a very short battle and not a storied battle. Lasted about 15 minutes. And
Mhm.
as you say, the great Tecumseh was killed. But that battle also had another effect. It's famous for Tecumseh being killed, but I think what is really seen is that with the defeat of the British at the Battle of the Thames, it stopped their meddling in affairs in what was called the Old Northwest. What became
Uh-huh.
Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. It stopped their meddling there and in northern Ohio. And Detroit was saved, Michigan was saved, and the settlers began pouring in after that battle. Yeah, with the expulsion of the British from that area, and the Indians in the area after that didn't have a chance.
And this is really the second confederation of Native Americans were brought together primarily, I guess, by Tecumseh, because back in 1794, at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, that was a huge attempt by the Native Americans to drive uh, Americans out of their land. And they had the support of the British. And then I guess the earliest, how do you say, uh, backlash against the spread of white settlers crossing over into the Northwest Territory was probably with Pontiac's rebellion
Mm.
when he brought native tribes together. So really, I guess the Battle of the Thames was the last major effort for native tribes to come together in sort of a confederation against
Well,
in
I don't know how many Indians were involved in that battle. Uh, but the alliance of the Indians with the British, in the Old Northwest, was their last attempt.
uh,
Save the Ohio country, Michigan, and what would become the states of Wisconsin and Minnesota
sure.
and Indiana.
Uh, well, the person allegedly who claimed killing Tecumseh was, I believe, a Kentuckian, Richard Johnson.
Yes.
What was his relationship with Shelby? Did they just work as commanders? Was he involved in the cavalry while Shelby
Well,
had the
he
infantry, or
he was one of the volunteers that Shelby raised. Yeah,
okay,
that's all.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And
Jack, what do you think is Shelby's legacy? What's his legacy to the
again,
American Revolution and America?
a hero of the Revolution, and his participation in building up Kentucky, and his alliance with William Henry Harrison during the War of 1812,
Yeah.
and really helping when he raised all those thousands of Kentucky volunteers, driving the British out of the Ohio country, the northern Ohio country,
Mhm.
and the old Northwest.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, that's all the time we have for today to talk about Isaac Shelby. So thank you so much for joining me once again.
And thank you for inviting me.
To our viewers and listeners, I've been talking with historian Jack Buchanan about three largely unknown American Patriot commanders who fought in our American Revolution: John Sevier, Isaac Shelby, and William Richardson Davie. Today, we specifically talked about Isaac Shelby. Well, my name is Randy Flood. Join us again next time for another exciting interview with an outstanding historian about the real American Revolution. So long for now.